Bearded dragons are one of the most popular pet lizards, but do they make good pets? Well, to answer that question, I'm here in Central Florida, back here at FairyTail Dragons to talk to Heather Moy to see if bearded dragons do in fact make good pets. I'm Dave Kaufman, and these are my reptile adventures. So I'm back here again with Heather Moy from FairyTail Dragons. The last time I was here, all these blue tubs weren't here. This is brand new for me anyway.
Yep.
So we're gonna kind of look through a lot of these tubs and see some bearded dragons.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Let's do it. So I actually, this system is new for me.
Yep.
I've tried over the last 5 years, I guess, about 4 different systems. This by far has been my favorite. This is ideally what I wanted, but it's quite an investment to kind of make it happen. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
But yes, this went into full mode this year, and I'm very excited about it. I absolutely love it. It's working out really, really well for me. So when the babies hatch, then I'm assigning basically a label. It has their hatch date, all their information, and then I update it as animals sell through, so on and so forth. If I move somebody around, I have a backup log in the house. But anyway, I'm able to keep track of all the genetics and
Sure.
exactly who the parents are and all that fun stuff.
Well,
So,
let's talk about these enclosures
yeah.
for a second, because this is pretty ingenious. Now, a lot of people that are watching this can't keep bearded dragons outside. They
Correct.
don't live in an environment that's conducive to, so we're going to talk
Correct.
about indoor enclosures in a bit. But for outdoor enclosures here in Florida, I mean, you've got the white part that gives them shade. You've got a sunning spot right here, which is really nice. And the beauty of this is you don't need ultraviolet lights. You
No.
have the natural ultraviolet light.
yeah, I don't need heat. I don't need to provide UV. So the animal's able to get all of that naturally. So they have a natural, they follow the natural cycle, which is really, really nice. The animals all have plenty of branches to climb. You notice back here. So they all have their own space. They're able to build muscle. They're able to develop well. They're nice and strong.
That is fantastic. Hi guys, how we doing over here?
Now this is 110 gallons, not 110 quart. It's 110 gallons, so it's a nice size enclosure. So I usually don't max it out any more than about 25 babies to start as hatchlings, and then as they grow, then the density decreases.
Sure.
So yeah, and it works out really, really well. I've been very happy with it.
All right, so let's move right in and talk about this substrate. So you're basically using sand that is basically from right here in Florida in your yard.
That's actually from my yard, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're in a unique situation here. There are a lot of places in Florida that this actually wouldn't work. If I tried to do this across the street, honestly, I'd fail miserably because the ground would not drain properly. So we're at a little bit higher elevation here. We specifically chose this location for certain, for the animals.
Sure.
So that we're able to produce, I'm able to breed the dragons and the blue tongues and keep them outside. And have them thrive rather than to run into problems with too much water, improper drainage, things like that. So we're able to make that work here, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work everywhere. So you have to understand your environment, and a lot of every place has its own microclimate, and I think that's something that people oftentimes kind of miss. You really need to pay attention to where you are. Even if you're keeping indoors, the way that my clientele keep indoors up north differs some from down south.
Of course.
Because of humidity, the cold, running a heater up north versus not so much down here. So all of that goes into play, and it changes the husbandry a little bit.
So substrate is one of those very controversial subjects when it comes to bearded dragons.
Mm-hmm.
This works here,
Yes.
but if somebody is in Missouri or Minnesota or California and they're keeping their bearded dragon inside, what do you suggest they use for substrate? Zilla has everything you need for your reptile pets, from caging to lighting and everything in between. To see their entire catalog and find out where you can get Zilla products near you, visit zillarules.com.
For substrate, there's a lot of different things that you can use. But it's more about using a combination of things, not necessarily just using one flat flooring. So a lot of my clients will use, for example, craft paper for like a baby. for a baby dragon. It's very simple, very clean. It's brown, so it's natural and it'll fit any type of decor. You can create like a little sandbox in the corner for enrichment, a lot of branches to climb, a piece of slate tile. I think one of the biggest things that I see that is problematic for dragons is putting a hammock directly under the basking spot. The animal needs to be able to, the stomach needs to be able to warm up for them to properly digest their food.
Right.
And if you're putting a hammock there, that you remove the ability of the animal to be able to do that. So I don't personally use hammocks, but I have a lot of clients that do. If you choose to use one, then I do recommend that you use it on the cool side rather than directly under the basking light, because depending upon some of those parameters, some of those different things that that you may have set up, you can end up with a problem. You can end up with an animal that develops improperly. They don't grow as they should. They get stunted and have developmental issues by having that hammock there rather than like a piece of slate tile or something that the belly can be warm.
So let's talk a little bit about food and watering for bearded dragons.
So hydration is incredibly important in bearded dragons, and that's one of the most common issues that occurs is not enough water, not enough hydration. And I'm not talking about sticking them in a bathtub full of water necessarily. That can be done, but there's much better ways to go ahead and hydrate them. Hydration through their diet. Most of the water that they intake is going to be through their food. So making sure that their feeders, the food that you provide, are well hydrated. So you're feeding the bugs that you're then feeding the animal. If the bugs are not hydrated, then you end up actually pulling, the animal has to use its own water and its own resources to digest that bug. So you don't want to actually pull from the animal, you want to be adding to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what about supplements to their food?
Yeah, supplements, they do need calcium, and one of the most important things that people oftentimes forget is a multivitamin.
Right.
Multivitamins are incredibly important. They provide them with critical things like vitamin A, vitamin Bs, which help with eye development, neuro issues, things like that. And that is something that a lot of people forget. There's many keepers out there will utilize the calcium. They always remember the calcium, but they forget about the multivitamin.
So what would you say is the best thing to feed bearded dragons?
Offering variety. Appropriate size feeders. So a guideline for new keepers, just in case husbandry is just a little bit off, is making sure that you don't offer any bug larger than the distance between the eyes. That allows for some human error if husbandry isn't right spot on.
Right.
So crickets, black soldier fly larvae, yes, mealworms. There's a common thing. For many, many years on the internet, they were saying you can't feed mealworms, you can't feed mealworms. I've been feeding mealworms for almost 20 years without any ill effect. If the animal is hydrated, they're not going to have any problems with the mealworm. If you're hydrating the mealworm, then that allows, again, what we went back to, what we spoke about earlier, it allows the animal to properly digest, and there's not an issue.
How does somebody hydrate their insects?
By feeding like slices of squash. Basically the salads and stuff, the greens that I offer to my dragons, I offer to my bugs. So I offer them, fresh leafy greens. I offer them, slices of carrots, slices of squash. I don't always offer the same thing. I rotate it because we're able to pull out nutrients from every item has different nutrients, whether it be vitamin A or E or, whatever, zinc, this and that. So you always want to rotate your feeders and rotate the veggies that you're offering. So all of my animals get greens offered to them every day. And then I also feed them appropriately sized bugs, and I rotate those as far as what I'm offering. I don't always offer the same thing. You're only offering a couple per animal per feeding. In the US, we have a tendency to really kind of overfeed our animals, and then obesity is a problem.
Sure.
And we end up with fatty liver disease and cancer and kidney issues and things like that. So, my clients will always send me a text or something and say, hey, how does this look? Do they look okay? And I'm totally fine with that. I don't have any problem with that, and no other breeder, most breeders aren't going to have a problem with that either. They're happy to help. Where we're able to kind of give you some guidelines as far as, are you feeding too much or too little, because it can be a little bit of a challenge for somebody when they first get a new pet to figure out exactly how much they should or shouldn't be feeding and what they should be feeding. So making sure that you're researching your breeder and finding one that's able to work with you and willing to answer those questions is incredibly important. And then that way they're not hard to keep, but there are a lot of questions initially where you kind of have to figure it out, and kind of get the hang of things, and so you want somebody there to offer that support.
Absolutely. So one of the things that makes bearded dragons such amazing pets is that they're so docile and so handleable. Talk a little bit about the proper way to handle a bearded dragon.
You always want to support the belly. A lot of times you never want to like grab them from above, because that would be reminiscent of them being picked up by prey, like a bird or something.
Right.
So that kind of terrifies them. So we always want to kind of scoop them up and support from the belly. I always let people know when they're getting a new animal, in my opinion and in my experience, what I feel best and what I tell my clients is when you take a new dragon into the house, obviously they're coming into the care of a brand new environment. They're not familiar with you, they're not familiar with their environment. So there's a couple things that you can do to help. Number one is if you have a glass enclosure that you're choosing to use, then to line the back 3 walls with paper inside the glass, not outside, but just plain white paper. And all you're doing is you're just kind of restricting their field of vision, so what's in front of them is new instead of not, a complete like, wow, what just happened. So it kind of gives them a better sense of security, and they're able to acclimate a lot faster. And of course you can pull that down. It's just plain white computer paper, just tape it up on the back 3 walls if you happen to have a glass enclosure rather than one of the melamines or PVCs that are available now. But that really helps to kind of settle them in, and then handling them maybe 5 to 10 minutes in a quiet way, in a quiet place, once or twice a day initially, and as they get more comfortable, then you can start increasing that time.
So let's move into talking about the proper enclosures. There's a lot of really good products out there, front opening enclosures, things like that that are readily available.
A long way.
Absolutely. So what is the best enclosure?
So ideally something for adult bearded dragon, in my opinion, a 4 foot, 4 by 2 by 2 or 4 by 2 by 18 tall work really, really well. You can start a baby off, or a juvenile and a 40 breeder without any problem, which is 36, 18, 18, so 3 foot by 18 by 18, and that is plenty of space, and you can increase that as time goes. So there's really no limit as to how much space you want to offer. You can offer as much as you want, but as far as how much you should be offering, then in my opinion, ideally, if you can pull it off, I definitely like the 4 footer, because you're able to do so much more with it. You're able to add furniture and provide enrichment for the animal that a 3 footer or something smaller isn't going to allow you to do quite as much with that. You can certainly use a 36, 18, 18, but I would make sure that animal has a lot of time out to roam and just experience and be able to be out. Not just where they're kind of in their enclosure all day long,
right?
Because that's can be a little bit limiting as far as what you're able to offer them.
So if somebody wants a baby bearded dragon, even their first baby bearded dragon, and they think that their new pet can live in a 10-gallon, or at least start out in a 10-gallon,
that's
what are your
hard
thoughts?
No.
That's a very hard no.
Hard no. Yeah.
Yep.
Bearded dragons have to be able to thermoregulate. It's extremely important. And if they're in a 10-gallon, they're not able to do that. In other words, they're not being able to choose if they want to be hot or cool. That animal has to be able to decide that. And if they can't, there's just so many detrimental things, including death, that can occur by overheating the animal. A lot of times we think, new keepers think, bearded dragon, desert, they need it hot, they need it all hot all the time, and they don't. They actually need to be able to cool off. They need a zone, in the 70s where they can go and chill out. All of my animals here, even though they're outside, they all have areas that they can seek shade, seek shelter, and cool down. They need that. They need to be able, they can't just be constantly, no animal on the planet, if you think about it, ever is out being blasted by the sun, by the heat, by the UV all day long. They come out in the morning and they bask. They come out throughout periods throughout the day for short periods and bask. And then they're gone and they're seeking shelter. They're seeking time out of UV. And it's no different inside. That's, you need to be able to provide them indoors with places to seek shelter, for places to get out of the heat, places to get out of the UV.
So in conclusion, do bearded dragons in fact make good pets?
They do, absolutely. They're very interactive. They're very social. They're the closest thing to, they shouldn't be compared to a mammal because they're not. They are a reptile, they are exotic, but they are going to be the closest to something like a cat or a dog. They work great for children who have allergies, who are unable to have, furry friends in the house, and so they do make a really good alternative pet.
So when it comes to bearded dragons, Heather Moy here at FairyTail Dragons is a walking encyclopedia on bearded dragon care, and that's why I wanted to come and visit with her to make this video. Anyway guys, I just want to give a real quick shout out and a thank you to all my Patreon supporters. For as little as $3 a month, you can get early access to my videos, rattle on swag, and so much more. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter, that link is in the description below. I would really appreciate it. And guys, thanks for watching, and until the next reptile adventure, love the planet, feed your reptile obsession, and rattle on.